And we're about to go live on Facebook in 3, 2, 1. Well, hello everyone on Spreaker.com. Welcome to Agree or Disagree the podcast. My name is Kevin Olenek. You can, of course, follow Agree or Disagree the podcast at A or D the podcast. You can also follow me on Twitter at KEVOLE. Also follow... you can subscribe on all podcasts as well, Google, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. Welcome also on Facebook Live as we are doing a Agree or Disagree the podcast. It's episode 2 of Lockdown Happy Hour, as we are taking some time here to talk about some of the things that have happened this week and some interesting things that have happened this week for sure. So if you're watching on Facebook Live, we have we'll be taking some questions there and comment on some of the things that we have. We have a couple of poll questions on Facebook Live that we will get into, but we first have to greet our panel. Hello, Mark Taylor. How are you?
I'm fantastic. Looking forward to another happy hour.
Yes, and I see today that you have shown your love for Ryan Reynolds with your Deadpool shirt.
Purely by coincidence. I do love Ryan Reynolds. He is fantastic. But no, the only because I had the Green Lantern shirt on, I didn't want to disappoint any of the Marvel fans this week because the DC got their call out last week. So
fair. We might have to do some Marvel reviews at some point, or DC reviews during some of these. Well, during the inside times now, as we call this. Deirdre, how are you? Deirdre Mitchell?
I'm doing well, thanks. How are you?
I am good. Anything interesting going on in your world? Other than what is going on? Anything other than the normal insanity that is going on in this world?
The new thing that I tried. Also, a shout out to Ryan. Aviation.
There we go.
Yes.
There we go.
We're going to have to tag him in this or something.
We probably should. We probably should. Also, Kristin, hello. Kristin Raworth.
Hi.
Your gown, wedding, I keep calling them wedding gowns, Kristin. I don't know why. I think your dad...
I don't know why either.
I think your tweets about your dad are influencing me in some way, shape, or form. But you were on CBC on Friday. And how did that go? How did you feel about that?
Oh, it was great. It was awesome. Thank you to CBC Edmonton for reaching out to me. I was really excited to do it, so it was pretty fun.
Yes, and
so hopefully it gives people a smile on people's face.
Yes. Well, what impressed me is you did one of those in -25, which now, as a BC resident, I have actually been. I'm actually immune to the nonsense of -25. It is not allowed in my body anymore, and I will not put up with that crap. So I'm proud of you 3 Albertans for putting up with that right now. Very impressive.
Well, but now I'm out of dresses, so next week's political T-shirts.
Oh, there we go. Okay. All right. Okay. There we go.
I saved my...
What's that?
I don't have sleeves. My good dresses. None of them have sleeves. I was too cold to do it today.
Fair enough.
And actually, really quick, Kevin, where do we find, why am I not seeing the live feed? Because I'm trying to share that.
I tagged you in it. I will, hang on a moment here.
Okay, back to
I see it.
Do you see it? Okay.
I just shared it on my page. Deirdre, if you can't see it, you can look on my page.
Okay. Yeah. So,
oh God, the people you might know on Facebook feed is always wrong. No, I don't know those people on purpose.
Yeah. That's yeah. We have a couple of poll questions to create some interaction. We're going to be, as we're doing this every Saturday, we'll create a couple of, we'll be doing this, but the 2 poll questions that we have is which politician has impressed you the most during this COVID-19? We have Doug Ford, we have John Horgan, We have Adrian Dix, we have Francois Legault as 4 options, but you can certainly comment on others that have impressed you. Maybe for that one, we'll just quickly I'll ask the panel, who has impressed you the most so far?
I can go first. Doug Ford. Like, I never thought that I would say that before in terms of my feelings upon Doug Ford, but he's been incredible. Like, he's been genuine, he's been honest, he's been so good with just getting the message across. It's obvious that this has really shook him and had a huge impact on him because his usual kind of gregarious self has really been altered. And just the way he's treated people and the messages have been very consistent, very clear. He stepped back when he's had to. I think he's done an incredible job. Also, he apologized to the people on our show who texted him who he couldn't text back because he's been busy. Which I just thought was cute and adorable, and I loved it.
Yeah, that was something like, you probably are getting 4 million texts, and I don't know if you have the time to do that, but good on you to try, for sure. Deirdre, what about you?
Who has impressed me the most? I kind of liked Francois Legault when I was watching him up to the election in, oh my gosh, what year was that now? Was it 2018?
Yeah.
It was. Okay. So I was kind of interested to see what he mostly liked. A lot of the things that he's done, obviously with a caveat of not, Bill 21. I think they're Bill 21, which was the religious...
The religious symbols.
Yes,
religious symbols law. Yeah. Yes. So aside from that, I'm definitely happy with what he's been doing during this, and I have to second Kristin. Doug Ford has been both surprising and mostly surprising, but good.
Yeah. Mark, what about you?
Well, I get to play ignorance here, claim ignorance, because I don't actually sit and watch any of the news conferences daily. I'll pick it up from Twitter. It's like, don't do this, do that. This is how many have been infected today. So I can't sit there and go, wow, I'm so impressed. Though I will echo that what I've seen online as well as from my colleagues here is that everybody seems to be impressed with Doug Ford. That a new Doug Ford has seemed to appear that took the reins of leadership rather than he was one of my first examples of why populists suck. So the fact that he's kind of turned into a politician as opposed to or into a parliamentarian and a leader versus a populist, that would be impressive for me. So outside of all the health stuff, I would say that's, somebody's finally grown into the role that he won.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to, I agree, but I do want to add, I've been very impressed with Adrian Dix. I think he's been, I think he continues to beat the drum of expecting more out of the federal government in terms of expectations when people are coming back to Canada. He is continued on that. He has shown a tremendous amount of compassion in his delivery, and this week he almost brought it. I felt that emotional crack from him. Like I totally appreciate that we need some statesman politicians trying to say some really important words right now, but I feel like Adrian Dix has shown some humanity here. Some really good things have happened, and I think there's some valid criticisms we may get into what's going on in BC, but I want to point also to Adrian Dix because I think he's done I think he's been a voice of compassion and a voice too that has been not afraid, even though they're probably aligned somewhat, of course, aligned on the political spectrum, sort of on the same side. one of those people that is not afraid to push the federal government do better in certain things, and it's not because, and is avoiding the partisan bullcrap that some have engaged in. Is that a fair way to say that without?
That's a fair way to say it.
I'm confused. We're now dealing with bullcrap. Are we going for a PG rating, or America is going to be here, or what?
Who says bullcrap anymore? Who's not 90 years old?
I may be 90 years old when this whole thing is done. Who knows? And then the other poll question we have is, which medical officer has impressed you? Dr. Dr. Dina Hinshaw, Dr. Bonnie Henry, or Dr. Teresa Tam? That's a tough one, I think, because they're all doing fantastic jobs, and it's maybe a little bit unfair, but in some ways. But we'll get into this a little bit later. There have been some questions about the information that has been delivered nationally, and I know that it had happened in BC. Is there questions in Alberta right now about the information that has been received? Is that fair?
Those aren't the questions I'm hearing being asked.
Yeah, no.
We got a bunch of other things we're asking questions about, but
okay, yes.
I think all Albertans are kind of on the same page that Dr. Dina, there have been no questions in terms of her ability and in terms of what she's been saying, and I think she's been very clear. And so we've focusing our question anger on other things, but not anything the Queen says, aka Dr. Dina.
Yeah, we're usually asking questions like, who's that guy in my driveway and why is he yelling at me? And how did you get my phone number?
We will get into those two things also as the hour goes up. But I want to start federally, so feel free, if you have any questions or comments on Facebook Live, please feel free to add them. We will look at them. We'll try to answer them as we go on. I'll be monitoring all this. But I want to start.
I tagged Ryan Reynolds too, so we'll see how that works.
Oh, okay, Ryan Reynolds.
I should do something like in honor of him, since the other two of you did. Love you, Ryan Reynolds. I watched two guys in a pizza place, whatever that show was, back before you were famous and terrible hair.
Okay, Ryan, you have an open invite to our podcast at any time. How's that? As well. Well, I want to start federally because there have been some controversy. One place that I think there has been some criticism directed in sort of the questions about information has been given this week between what happened with the numbers in China. And I have a clip from what Justin Trudeau said earlier this week. And then I'm going to play a clip from Patty Hajdu. And just want to see if we notice anything different. Justin Trudeau was asked about numbers from China, and hopefully on Facebook you can hear this, but I'll try to summarize it for you after we hear this.
Around the world have been sharing information with each other on their cases and on what has been effective in terms of measures. We've learned a lot from South Korea, Singapore, and other countries. We've learned, unfortunately, a lot from Italy as well in terms of what worked and what didn't work there. We need to keep learning from other countries, but we also need to be really thoughtful about how we process and understand that information. Obviously, there'll be many questions as this is all worked through over the coming months and indeed years on how this was handled, what lessons are taken, who did well, who didn't do as well, and who was perhaps not as forthcoming with the global community as they should have been.
I want to make sure that last line that Trudeau said was who was not as forthcoming with their numbers as they should have been in the global community. Now, Patty Hajdu was asked the same question. This is what she had to say.
There's no indication that the data that came out of China in terms of their infection rate and their death rate was falsified in any way. In fact, if you look at the death rate overall in China, it's much higher than the one we're seeing now. And so we rely on the World Health Organization to do this important work, smart because, of course, we're all in this together. And I think one of the most important things to understand about this pandemic, this global pandemic, is that as long as coronavirus exists in one country, it exists in all of our countries. That we actually have to work collectively as a world now to defeat this virus, to find better ways to treat and then eventually prevent this virus through vaccination or other kinds of methods. And that's going to take everybody working together. And
sorry, please let her finish up.
So I would say that your question is feeding into conspiracy theories that many people have been perpetuating on the internet, and it's important to remember that there is no way to beat a global pandemic if we're actually not willing to work together as a globe.
So I do want to. There was a question asked for those that did not hear that on Facebook Live, and the basic question was asked is, and Patty Haidu's response was, "Is you're feeding into conspiracy theories." What are we, in terms of China, what do we do with that information, and how does the federal government handle this? From my perspective, it feels like Trudeau's answer and Haidu's answer was not consistent. To me, maybe I noticed something different, and you can disagree with me, and I'm okay with it. I have thick skin. And I'm wearing 2 shirts, so you will not be and a podcast. So there we go. Go ahead.
Well, I'll step out and say I disagree. I think they're both kind of on message. Neither one of them came out and directly claimed that China was misreporting their numbers. There was an implication somebody might be, and if everybody's going to feed into it's China, then so be it. But there's. Both of them basically said, it's going to come out in the wash at some point. The facts will come out. We will deal with it then. This is not the priority of any of our health officials or our leaders is whether or not China is telling the truth. So, if we're going to sit there and start wrapping tinfoil and go, oh, it's much worse in China and they're not telling us the story, it's not like it's only affecting 2 countries. So the data can be received elsewhere. We still have, sometime after this is all done, diplomacy to maintain international trade. This is not a regime that takes lightly to being accused of things. So let's not jump the gun and make accusations false or true until such time as the facts can be presented in a collegial manner.
And I think just building off of that, it's important to remember that the 2 Michaels are still being held in China. So there's a lot of things that the Prime Minister has to think about when he's talking about this. And to actively accuse the Chinese government of making up numbers would put those 2 people at risk and put more Canadians who might be in China at risk. I personally don't trust that the Chinese government is being honest, but I'm also not the Prime Minister and responsible for the lives of other people. So I can understand why him and Minister Haidu are not necessarily going that route. And again, when this is over, we have more than enough time for recrimination and time to talk about who wasn't honest and who should have been more open. Right now, we just need to address the immediate concern, which is the pandemic itself.
Very diplomatic, Kristin.
Thank you.
I would have to say, pardon me, it was actually difficult for me to hear Patty Haidu's response because I covered the Bloomberg, what do I want to call, revelation that senior officials in the White House were discussing China's numbers. Now, that came out, I don't know, let's say Wednesday, because I have no idea. But it was this last week, and it was somewhat recently, but not Friday. And then I read, I think on Thursday or Friday, New York Times, they went to their sources in the CIA. And the interesting, a little bit better look at whether or not China's numbers were correct. And the thing about the thing about the New York Times article is that they did not put the full responsibility on the federal government in China. They actually put it on the hospitals, the municipal leaders, the regional representatives. They actually put it on a different number of different levels because it's not something that everyone knew about. And they also mentioned that Italy right now, because they are so overwhelmed, that they are actually only counting, they're only taking
Deirdre,
so right.
Oh, sorry, you cut out a little bit there. Can you just repeat that again, please?
Not the whole thing, right?
No, just what Italy's doing.
What Italy's doing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Italy right now is only counting deaths in the hospitals. So the deaths that are happening outside of the hospitals aren't actually even being counted at this time because they don't know whether or not those individuals may have been infected with COVID-19. They just don't have the resources at the moment to be keeping up with stuff that's going on outside the hospital. So the New York Times article was a little more enlightening, so to speak, because while they were saying that, yes, it's very possible that we don't know the numbers coming out of China, but to be honest, we don't know the numbers anywhere. We do not have accurate numbers because we don't know the rate of infection because of a lack of testing. And so it's not, they didn't put it squarely on the Chinese government for that. So that was interesting to me. And everyone else.
Yeah, and it's a great point. You know, if you pass away and you haven't been tested, how do you know we should be confirming that, you know, pneumonia or whatever the circumstances were was actually COVID and not just natural pneumonia? And our neighbors right to the south are probably bigger propagators of this than China is at this point.
Of not getting their
numbers. I think the other thing is there's a lot of this mistrust for the Chinese government builds off of what we were hearing leading into all of this around Huawei and the 5G network and, again, the two Michaels, and the fact they're also currently committing genocide against Muslims within their country. So there's all of these different things that are going on that bleed into this incredible distrust that Canadians have. And the Conservative Party of Canada has been very vocal, and Aaron O'Toole especially has been extremely vocal around the Chinese government. So that's also helped propagate this on Twitter and in other social media networks because it's coming out of that group of folks.
Yeah. Agreed.
But not Stockwell Day, if you'll note, because he is on the board of Huawei.
Oh, of course.
Oh, I did not. I forgot about that, actually.
And tell us.
And tell us.
I never forget Stockwell Day facts.
I will always remember Stockwell Day and the boat. That's how I remember Stockwell Day. Coming in on the boat.
He used to be our finance minister.
Yeah.
I also remember that he was supposed to change his name to Doris.
Yes. Thanks, Rick Mercer.
Yeah. Thanks for yes. Who had a great 22-minute moment this week, or rant this week, which was great. If you had a chance to
see. Saw that as well. Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess the conclusion, what we're hearing here is, I think that there's some lines that we need to thread, which leads us, I think it's important now, after Trump announced or told 3M not to make masks. 3M basically said, I'm going to summarize this, and if this is inaccurate for anyone, I apologize, but 3M basically told Trump to fuck off, as simple as that is. But this will lead to some interesting conversations after about something that Mark has been bringing about what does it mean. But the question I'm going to ask is probably not even sufficient at this point, because it's in my mind it's how should Canada respond, but it's not even that. Because I liked what Adrian Dix said. It's not about retaliation. It's about the force of working together. But I guess for Canadians in terms of how to deal with this, with the pandemic and their own situation and what we're dealing with here and what is needed, what questions should be asked of the federal government at this point? Maybe that's the better question. What questions should be asked of the federal government at this point?
With regards to Trump?
Yes. Yes. And supply. Like, how do we deal with Trump going forward now? And how do we deal with the supply issue that we are potentially facing at this point?
I'll just say that I think that Trudeau and Chrystia Freeland's response on this is pitch perfect because they are dealing with a child. They're dealing with a little bitch baby who cannot handle having anyone be critical of him. And if Trudeau had come out the way that Doug Ford and Jason Kenney did, that would not have gone well. So they are doing everything that they possibly can, and this is the same response that you got from both of them during the NAFTA negotiations. That is just, they are being very gentle with it and probably behind the scenes having those conversations, but they can't do anything publicly or else he'll strike back 3 times harder. So I think they're balancing this the best that they can right now. And we can't, the more that we ask in terms of, are you going to have a strong response? Or are you going to push back? The more that we're going to get stonewalled responses from them because they can't say anything publicly or else it'll harm us more in the future.
I'll go back to, a couple of weeks ago, we were talking, it might be a couple of weeks again, it's a day ending with who knows. Or I guess really at this point, it's no longer a day ending with why, it's a day starting with who freaking cares.
Yeah.
We had the conversation about, should we be shutting the border to Americans? And collectively, the answer was yes. And then everybody started freaking out because Justin Trudeau didn't shut the border, and we had to wait for Donald to shut the border to us. And that's how we have to deal with the U.S. government, hopefully, for 7 more months. Because, as Kristin said, we have a child running things down there, and he does childish things. Did you hear? He's #1 on Facebook. This is the level of leadership they're getting down there. And there's nothing we can do. We can't be stern. We can't do anything because he's a petulant little child. So we can't send him to his room. We can't cut him off from dinner. You're just going to have to let this temper tantrum run for 7 more months and pick up the pieces at that point. Because we have to tell him what we'd like to do, and then we have to let him announce it so that he sounds great, and then we just give him a thumbs up. The whole premise of putting tanks on our border, what the hell was that about? We still haven't got a right answer. The last comment I heard was, China is dumping steel into the States via Canada, and so this is our response. What? Were the Chinese actually personally, physically carrying and dumping in a wheelbarrow the steel into northern Washington and Montana? We're just here dumping steel.
It's the plot of the South Park movie.
Yeah.
I didn't deal with models, not that kind of model. God damn. Gee.
Yeah.
Pardon my language, but really, in the middle of this, you're going to make a joke like that, honestly. Anyway.
And so we sit here and we're questioning about, has China been upfront with us? And our biggest concern on a public health, on a supply chain, on an international trade, on the going forward after all this, on, just about every topic deals with a knucklehead on the other side of the 49th.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And at this point, I don't care if Italy hasn't purported the right. I don't care if China is doing these things. I'm more concerned about when President Cheeto decides he's going to do whatever next, whatever just pops into his head.
Yeah. That is more concerning for us as Canadians.
Bigger fish to fry.
Yeah. But in terms of... Deirdre, did you have a comment on that? Or
No.
Okay. But is the conservative or is the opposition argument or the question around how we're getting supply to Canadians, is this and what Canada needs to do themselves a valid argument question, or are they being ridiculous?
I mean, I think that the concern that was raised on, was it Friday? Was that yesterday? About why we are using Amazon as opposed to using Canada Post and Purolator, which are Crown corporations. I think that is a fair concern and a fair question, especially given the concerns around the way that Amazon treats their staff. And so I think those are fair questions. I think the job of the opposition is even more important now than ever in order to make sure that what we are doing as we move forward is being done correctly. I don't have an answer for that in terms of what's better. I know that when I order for something from Amazon, it comes in 2 days, but Canada Post, it could be like whenever they feel like bringing it to me. So I can understand, but I think that these things are legitimate questions. Jokes aside, for a moment.
Well, I mean, we created a global economy. You know, a majority of our manufacturing happens in China. We intentionally did that as Canadians, as North Americans. This is how we set up our capitalist structure, that most of the stuff was going to get built in China. And now we're panicking because we don't have anything built locally. So, like, can we turn around and retool local manufacturing plants? I'm sure there's a bunch of oil field tool companies that have got close, if not all, the tools they need to build ventilators or build N95 masks. Sure, great. But that doesn't turn on a dime. So there's going to be some stuff. But the bigger question is, you know, how are we setting those things up? I'm sure some of those companies would love to get some of those government contracts and be able to put some money into the bank that wasn't just an emergency handout, but rather, you know, they're contributing to the greater cause. But those things take time, and you don't flip a plant over in 24 hours. You don't flip a manufacturing plant staff over in 24 hours. So, you know, this was kind of the cards we dealt. We're going to have to figure out a global solution for these things as well.
Yeah. And I think too that, you know, asking the questions, it's about tweaking the question that we're asking. It's not so much the negativity need to be there. The partisan response doesn't need to be there. Questioning policy is good policy. It's good policy for everyone. And, you know, just because one group of individuals see something this way, they might not see it. They might not be looking at it from this other perspective. So we do need to question the policy. But, you know, as Kristin brought up, we need to also be aware of the other things that are surrounding this. It's not just, you know, the question that you're asking, the answer isn't necessarily just simple as, yes, we can do this, or no, we can't. There's other things at play, especially when you're looking at our political leadership at the federal level, because they're not just dealing with the provinces, they're dealing with the U.S. and every other country in the world from their pulpit.
Right. Yeah. And that's a fair thing. And I'm see, this is why I do podcasts, because I learn something even as we do this as well. Right. And you're right. Because and I think that it's important to realize that there is a bigger picture there, which leads also to the question. And so BC is announcing that they are planning to do another modeling in a couple weeks to see where we are at. Jason Kenney announced yesterday that Alberta is doing a model, bringing out a model next week. Ontario did a model on what we used to call in the before times Friday or yesterday. And basically the highlight was they were anticipating between 3,000 to 15,000 deaths at the rate of what they are doing right now. There has been a question if there needs to be a national model, and that has not been done or has not been answered as of yet. So what is the pros and the cons of a model in your mind?
Okay, can I?
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay. Modeling for those of us who are political, watchers, observers, obsessively doing so, we all know that a poll for voter intention is pretty much useless the day after people answer the poll. Modeling, unfortunately, works in a very similar way. So we put in all of the data that we have at this exact moment, and when we push the return button to find out some numbers, that model is officially obsolete. What that model told us was what we could expect based on the information that we had at that time. Models, I know Theresa Tam put something out today as well where she said they are not crystal balls. And it's true, they're not. But they literally are the best thing that we have to be able to say, what could this potentially look like? And, you can put in all of these different variables. Unfortunately, we're dealing with human beings. And with human beings, there are way too many variables to actually be able to get something super, super accurate. And things change. So models are fantastic for being able to say, like when Saskatchewan's was leaked the media, that was March 24th. And I only know that because I had to look up recently and found it again. So it was March 24th. And the Saskatchewan Health Authority had given a presentation on their modeling and what it showed. Now, the thing was that what that modeling told them was that they didn't have enough care spaces in hospital. They didn't have enough ICU beds. So they needed to make some policy changes to be able to accommodate a potential of, 45,000 people needing hospital. Okay, so that's way beyond the capacity that they have. But what that model did was tell them they needed some more. Now, does that prediction have to come true? No, because it depends on whether or not people stay home when they're sick. It depends on whether asymptomatic people are out infecting everyone. There's so many variables to that, but important to give you an idea of what you might need. So Jason Kenney pulled quite the Jason Kenney gave his commentary on Wednesday night in the legislature, and he said that their modeling showed that at the peak of the pandemic, they may need 1,250, I believe, or 1,200 ICU beds, 1,200 ventilators. So what he said is, we are working on getting 1,200 ventilators. That's the number that they're going to use. Again, is that number absolute? Not even close to being absolute. That number changed as soon as, before he was even given the information to put it out there. And again, like I said, if we all self-isolate, if we all stay home when we're sick, if we're all super careful about our personal hygiene and everything else, we can get through this faster. But modeling, is it important? Yes. But was obsolete as soon as they pressed enter.
So before I get to everyone else, I'm going to ask you to this because you are a journalist. You are paid to be a journalist. And we'll talk about your boss here in a moment. Well, your boss did a good thing.
Yay! Okay.
There has been some criticism from some people that the word that some journalists are using the word as modeling data. First, are you seeing that, and B, what are your thoughts on that criticism?
Am I seeing a criticism on the numbers?
Are people using it as? Are you seeing journalists display it as data, and are you seeing that?
Yeah. It's that is a tough question because it depends on how much research you're doing around it. So when I went to university, I took social sciences, I took sociology, I had to take statistics courses, so social research and things like that. So I have a little better background on what research is used for, what data is used for, what we can glean from it, how it can be misused, mostly how it can be misused. But like all of those fun things, that's just a personal background I happen to have, right? So So I'm going to talk about modeling very differently than someone who does background. And, you know, there's also a difference between someone who is practicing journalism and someone who is practicing reporting. If I'm reporting, I'm literally telling you what other people are saying, what other people are doing. That's it. That's all. I'm just reporting what is going on. So there's two different types of that media report that we get as well. And unfortunately, you need to know which one you're looking at. Okay. So is it a fair criticism? Well, it can be, but it depends, because maybe they're just reporting. Okay. Which is, I know, more confusing than not. But
no, it may be, but I think that's it, as we're going through this. I think that there's an important distinction here of what is happening here, because I think you're probably right. We are blending two different things into one thing, and it may not be a fair thing to do.
Mm-hmm. I think there should always be caveats coming in with those types of modeling. I mean, think about how often Stephen Carter would grab a poll on voter intention and say, "This doesn't matter. Our election is over a year away. This doesn't matter. This is not telling us what's actually going to happen." Now, if the voter results turn out to be the same as model or as polling that was done a year before or 2 years before, does that mean that it was correct? No, it just means that people still decided to do that a year later. Like it's a snapshot in time, and unfortunately the modeling is as well. Okay. It's a snapshot.
Mark, Kristin, what are your thoughts?
Well, I got a rant.
Go for it, man.
Well, okay, so my background, I've got an engineering degree. So I've got a number of statistics and science and math courses, and I find it really irresponsible for politicians to be saying, we've got a model and here's what it says, because they're not sharing the entire catalog of stuff they have at their disposal. And this is what we pay our leaders to do is, you know what, you've got experts, you got health experts, you've got economic experts, you've got all these experts. Some are within the bureaucracy, some are third party. You're bringing them in. Somebody is doing some modeling, somebody's doing some other modeling, answering a different question. All those things are, and then all of a sudden you sit there and go, oh, here's our modeling. This is what it says. Well, we think people are going to get sick. Well, that's irresponsible of a government official to be even mentioning those things, because there's no context. And then all of a sudden we now have Karen from Facebook deciding, because nobody else has got enough research background, that Karen's going to tell us what all this really means. This is where we run into problems is, you know, they say ignorance is bliss, but a little information is a dangerous thing. And now we're sitting into this dangerous thing era where we just drop off, maybe 15,000 people will get sick. We don't know. Like Alberta might be leading in testing, but we're not Iceland level testing everybody in the province. So we don't know if that number's right. We're making a speculation based on the data that's available. And we're trying to make decisions based on that speculation. Well, that's fine if you're behind closed doors in a leadership role, having to make hard decisions. But to stand up in a press conference and go, hey, this is how many people we think are going to get sick, that's irresponsible. And it just drives me that, you know, and what data do we have? Do we know, how many people are truly sick? Do we know, can you get reinfected? We don't know any of this stuff. And so how's that going into the modeling? Like, there's just so many unknowns. And, you know, if I had that many unknowns in an engineering class, I'd have to go and get more data before I could hand in anything as an assignment.
But let me just play a little bit of a devil's advocate with you here. I understand what you're saying, and I do see what you're saying, but I do think that there is a comfort for some people to know where we are at.
But that's
no, I think it's not even about comforting, actually. I think it's more about letting people understand how serious the issue is. I think that that's the reason why Ontario decided to release their numbers. I think it gave you a window into why they have brought in such extreme measures that they have. Same thing with BC. Mm-hmm. I think there is a feeling from, even in Alberta, and you're seeing this more because Kenny has now talked about wanting to bring in our own numbers, is about showing people, okay, this is serious, and this is why we want to do this, and why we're bringing in this modeling. We're not saying this is what's going to happen, but this is what could happen if you don't do what we are telling you to do and stay home and do what the doctors are ordering you to do and be safe and be aware. I think that's the messaging and the reasoning behind it. It's not about bringing comfort to anyone, because God knows those Ontario numbers didn't make me feel better.
No, maybe it's the wrong word, but something. I think what Jen how Jen Gerson worded it, I liked, is like, give me a reason why you want me to do the things that you're doing. And I think that's from that perspective, I understand why people want something. But I also do see what you're saying, Mark, in terms of like we have to be careful of how these numbers are interpreted and how we are presenting them, because there are a lot of caveats to this, right?
There are, and you've also got okay, let's look at Trump 2 weeks ago saying, well, more people die from the flu and we don't shut our economy down. The attitude like that.
A certain Calgary philanthropist did that as well.
Yes, he did. And yeah. So, I mean, these are like, this is one potential setback of putting some of these numbers out there, is that you will have people say, well, that's not so bad. Mm-hmm. Or that doesn't really seem like you should be locking us down and shutting down all of these businesses. And again, the variables that exist at the time when you decide to do that modeling. So one of the variables that would exist is we have, let's say, 600,000 people laid off and or working from home. So we know that we've taken 600,000 people approximately out of regular general contact. That matters. Because without that, well, guess what? Again, your modeling completely changes. It looks completely different. And and if there's if you have so if that changes, well, suddenly those 1,200 ventilators that we need, we actually now need 12,000 because we've let everybody go back to work. Okay, right. So again, these models are so ridiculously sensitive to any change that is why I think there was a reluctance to release the information to begin with, and why there should be, again, some caveats when they are releasing this information, because they need to explain that if nothing changes from this exact moment, that's a big part of the modeling working.
But it still goes back to, I don't have enough faith, and I'm sorry, I don't have enough faith in the general public to have enough scientific literacy to, even if you put a caveat on something, they're paying attention to this. Like I was doing some digging on an article, and there were some horrible scientific leaps of logic, and we might get into it later. But we've got like a U.S. governor, and I'm not even keeping track anymore which one it is. But one who 2 days ago made the comment, I didn't know it could transfer from person to person.
Yeah.
What? What have we been talking about for a month? You didn't know. You're running a state.
Yeah.
And you didn't know it like that. There's scientific illiteracy, and there's scientific, the world is flat. And to be like this guy, basically admitted, I'm just going to kill a bunch of people because I'm an idiot.
Yeah.
And so this is where, the debate shouldn't be, should we putting B models out? It's, what level of freaking if you don't have the scientific literacy, can you at least open your brain enough to listen to somebody who does? Because really, that's what we're seeing and I think that's what you're seeing is a big difference between Canadian legislators and American legislators is, even the ones you dislike in this country, depending on your political stripe, they're still listening to their health official.
Yeah.
If Dr. Fauci had his way, he probably would be beating Trump's head into the podium on a daily basis. But he's a professional, and he's not going to do that. But I can guess that's what's going on in his mind. And I'm guessing there's 50 other health officials who have got the same problem at varying degrees across the United States. If you're Andrew Cuomo's, he's probably losing his mind because Cuomo didn't act on it soon enough. As much as Cuomo has been awesome in what he's doing, they're ground zero, probably because they didn't act fast enough. There's a bunch of others who are like pointing, going, did you see what happened in New York? That's coming here. And their officials are going, yeah, but Donald says I don't need to wear a mask.
Yeah. Okay. And as much as the absurdity may be, somewhat amusing, it's really not because these people are responsible for millions of other people, and they are stupid decisions in this particular situation will absolutely get people killed. Mm-hmm. That's a basic problem that we are dealing with.
And I think it's a fundamental issue that exists in the United States because Donald Trump doesn't want to accept that this is going to have an economic impact. That's been his issue from the beginning. It's not even necessarily about the science or the medicine or whatever. It's about the fact that he refuses to accept that things need to shut down, that the economy is going to shut down for a period of time. And we have to deal with that. And we have to, as a country, as a global world, we have to support people in a way that is incongruent with Donald Trump's fundamental perspective on life. So I think that that's one of the biggest issues that we're seeing is the idea of government giving people money to survive is against the Republican and Donald Trump's perspective of life. So they've chosen to ignore things because it doesn't work for them politically.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Or personally. Because you're seeing like Jared Kushner, the news is coming out. It's while Kushner is supposed to be handling all the medical supplies down there, his companies are still charging rent to people and causing evictions. So clearly they don't see this as an issue.
Yeah. And it's not only their nation that they're killing people. It is global because their decisions impact everyone.
Yep.
Well, like Mark said, I think a lot of the reason why we've seen the boom in rates in Quebec and Ontario is because the United States didn't do a good job in containing the virus. And we saw a lot of people going back and forth because they weren't. And the other thing is what we're forgetting in this entire conversation is how expensive medical care in the United States is.
Yeah.
So a lot of people are not going to the doctor. They aren't getting the help that they need because they can't afford it.
That's what I said to my mom when, I don't know, she was watching some newscast. I should check that. Anyway, she was watching something and they were very, very specific about how the U.S. at that time, so this had to have been before, when was their first case? Was their first case in March or was it end of February?
End of February.
February 25th. Don't ask. So, prior to that, they were very specific that the U.S. didn't have any cases. And I looked at my mom and I said, do you know how many people don't have health insurance down in the States? I said, they're not going to the doctor. They're not getting tested. And I guarantee you they're going to work because they can't afford to take the
time off.
Yeah.
Well, that's even the same speculation why here in Calgary we've got a number of long-term care homes that have suddenly had massive explosion in rates, and people are pointing, going, "You've got staff that are working in all those facilities
because they're part-time."
Yeah. So if you're going to pay, you're an essential worker, but you're part-time essential working, and you got to pay the bills somehow.
BC had the same problem, which is why they now have cases in 23.
The number.
Well, look what happened in Ontario.
Yeah.
Quebec has cases in 519 of their seniors' residences and facilities.
What's Alberta at right now? It's BC, because I think BC Alberta's at 9. Okay, BC's at 23. Yeah, but 23. However, they are putting the caveat that they are lowering the threshold of what an outbreak is.
Like lowering it in a good way. So if there's one case,
yes. If there is one case, they are considering it an outbreak.
Alberta did that on Friday. Wow.
What
days? So we just did that yesterday. Yeah. Where we were Dr. Hinshaw explained, because we've got one seniors residence in Calgary that has 65 cases. So there's 73, one of the two, 73 or 74 positive cases at seniors residences. 65 of those cases are at one residence, which is the Mackenzie Town Continuing Care Center. So somebody asked, they said, well, how do you define outbreak? Because you're saying that there's an outbreak at all of these, but yet there's 65 cases at this one center. And so Dr. Hinshaw explained it and said, if there is one case, we will consider there to be an outbreak at that center because they do so much together. They eat together. They have their common rooms and things. So because of that, they will consider it an outbreak if there's one case.
Yeah.
Which makes sense, right? We need to kind of let everybody know and treat this as a potential major outbreak.
Yeah. Just before we'll transition in Alberta here, but thank you for those again that are listening on Spreaker.com, Facebook Live. We're doing our lockdown happy hour-ish. We've got Deirdre Mitchell, Kristin Raworth, Mark Taylor with me. I'm Kevin Olenek. If you have any questions on Facebook Live, feel free to comment. We'll continue that, but we are now we're going to have to talk about Alberta now. And there's a blend of all three of these topics that are going in, and I guess let's continue on with what we're talking about in terms of what is the communication from Hinshaw and Dr. Hinshaw and then this will lead us to the elephant in the room, which is Health Minister Tyler Shandro. Maybe Deirdre, just continue on with what you're saying, because I had a question and I lost my train of thought. So continue on.
Continue on.
Let's just jump to Kevin's next question.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's make it an uncomfortable segue.
Right. Okay, let's bring up Shandro now. Let's start there, I guess, because it's hard.
Again.
It's hard. Last week I asked if this was a distraction to the information being given on COVID, in the sense that we're focusing on this information. I'm going to ask a question differently, and this is an awkward way to do this. And then I think I'm going to ask it this way, and then I think we can break down what exactly is going on. Is it time for Shandro to step away?
I thought it was going to be a hard question.
Well, in some senses, this can be a hard question because this is not the best time to adding a new health minister into a situation. This is not going to be easy for someone to adapt or jump into. It's Brooke's Law, right? That is a huge challenge. But on the other hand, there is literally, from what I can see, no trust at this point to Tyler Shandro.
All right, I'm gonna jump in on that. That's not accurate. I think that when we have this conversation around the trust in Tyler Shandro and the issues with that, so much of that is playing to the Twitter base and playing to people on Twitter who are mad and people who are mad in general. I don't think that that's necessarily reflective of how all Albertans feel. All four of us are extremely plugged in and very engaged. So we know how we feel, and people on Twitter have their own feelings and impressions. I don't think that that's necessarily reflective of the full Alberta population. So I think that we need to be very cautious when we have these conversations about, the UCP scandal of the day, that we are clear that we're talking about a population on Twitter that a good 80% of those people are on there to shit on the UCP every single day. So it's not surprising that all of those people also would like Tyler Shandro to resign.
But we are
not talking about the general Alberta population. We are talking about plugged-in politicos, and we're talking about Twitter people.
But to counteract that, though, he hasn't been at one single press conference. He has not.
And why should he be? Primarily, it's been Dr. Henshaw. Jason Kenney has been there when it has been a provincial issue, and each minister that has been there when they're speaking to their specific ministry.
So, from what you're saying here, and
the health minister hasn't been there in a lot of other provinces either, to be fair.
Okay, that's I'll grant you that, but even if you're not plugged in or not, I guess maybe I'll ask it this way: are we, from the Twitter explosion that you're saying and the anger, are we missing something from this information that we are getting on Tyler Shandro?
Well, I think for the most part, it doesn't matter. Like we're sitting there. Should he resign? Should Jason Kenney fire him? Tyler's not going to resign. Jason's not going to fire him. Why do we continue to ask the question? Because it's not going to happen. We're 3 years away from the next election, 3 years away from the real judgment of, did this government do a good job? And it's maybe it's a little bit of a distraction. Maybe Tyler's acting in an appropriate way. As I said last week, it needs to be actually put in front of a panel, and that discussion needs to be had. Now, if the panel is the same makeup as the legislature, well, we know how that's going to go. I don't even need to find out who the names are. Well, if it's five UCPers and 3 NDPers, I can tell you what the panel's going to say. So nothing's going to change. And so asking the question of should he resign or should he be fired just doesn't matter.
Okay. Deirdre, do you have
She's currently MIA.
Okay.
Yeah, her face gone.
Face gone.
I think to build off of what Mark said, it's just not going to happen. So at this point, it's basically just social media noise. And it is not something that we need to be focusing on right now because it's not going to happen. And so let's just try to refocus our energy to having a conversation about what we're going to do about this. And also to try to tone down the rhetoric a little bit, because when you see the NDP in the House constantly talking about Tyler Shandro, they're missing an opportunity to ask questions about what this response is going to look like. I haven't seen one member of the opposition ask what the response is going to look like going forward, because we know that the psychosocial supports and the need these communities are going to have and what all of us are going to have is going to be huge. I haven't seen one question on that. All I see is their health critic get up every day and read his little letters that he gets from people about Tyler Shandro. It's a waste of time and it's partisan nonsense.
Two big things that came up this week that I don't think got a lot of coverage, whether because of Tyler Shandro or because of COVID or whatever else. The first one is the medical clinic in Sundre, Alberta, basically said, we are not providing doctors to the hospital anymore. They are one of the most efficiently run medical clinics in all of rural Alberta. You're going to see this happen everywhere else. So now the provincial ministry is going to have to go out and recruit hundreds, if not thousands of doctors to work in these hospitals because the local clinics will no longer support it. We're not hearing anything about that. The other one that really impressed, this is one of the things where I think the NDP actually did a good job highlighting. David Shepherd highlighted why they voted against Bill 10. And so there was two minor points, but their biggest issue was that Bill 10 also now gave all the ministers the ability to write law without review of the legislature. So Tyler Shandro can now write law pertaining to health, and it doesn't get reviewed. That concerns me more about Tyler Shandro and his actions because he hasn't come across as a professional. Now he has the ability to do carte blanche legal things. Now, as a lawyer, I'm sure the law will be good, but he hasn't professionally acted in a way that I trust him to put forward law that, and it's no different than China did the following things, and this is why we don't trust them. Tyler's done the following things, and so when Tyler brings forward a law, I might be a little suspect of what the intentions are.
And just to build off of that quickly before Deirdre, who's back, gets an opportunity to talk, the problem with that is whether or not it was a good presser or not, they do 5 a day. Like the NDP do constant pressers, one after the other, after the other, after the other. So again, what are substantial issues get lost. Like I think on legitimately did 5 on environmental issues, on community social services, on rent stuff, and again on Tyler Shandro. So they need to be more focused if they are going to get any real buy-in to the issues that they're raising, and that issue around Bill 10, that should have been a big issue, but they didn't make it their issue of the day because it was among 6 other things that they chose to speak about that day.
All right, Deirdre, I'll give you the floor. I'm sorry, I'm watching 4 things and I missed that you left.
Yeah, no, no worries. I'm actually going to piggyback off of Kristin's there, because one of the things that we've been talking about, Mark and I, on
perfect time to hang up Mark and I and just pause.
Yeah.
One of the things that we've been talking about is opposition, and it's so. I mean, maybe we brought this up before. Honestly, now I don't remember, because when we're talking about that role, be negative as you want, but I mean, question periods shouldn't be used to try and bring somebody into a gotcha moment. They should be demanding answers to, why haven't you done this? Or very specifically, but it seems like it's geared towards this gotcha, this what I used to actually, when I watched it and I used to tweet it out and I would be like, here are the daily burns, people poll your favorite. That was a way for it to sort of be amusing to sit back and watch, but honestly, it got very tiring. As soon as it came back in, I was like, I don't know that I can do this anymore, because it just seems like an awful waste of time. And that's, you have these moments to ask questions. Stop trying to get them into a gotcha moment and ask them to explain why they decided to do this, or use it to, I don't know, to make things better, right? That's what we keep asking, is just make things better.
So maybe this is an interesting opportune time to add something I didn't think that we would be adding, but I think that this is important, especially in Alberta, Abledge in Alberta, and it's almost like it's there's no real way to add nuance into Twitter. It's almost impossible. But I do feel like there's some literacy here that it sounds to me, from what I'm hearing the 3 of you say, is there's some literacy missing here, in a sense that not that you have to take a side, but maybe what is the priority at this particular point in time that we need to be talking about? Is that a fair thing to say?
It is, but it's weird here, right? Like we have, I actually don't know if this is the case, so help me out, anyone who has been tuning in outside of our province. I mean, obviously I've seen some BC things, seeing a little bit out of Saskatchewan. I am not seeing nearly the level of animosity government and opposition in any other province.
It's not happening here.
So,
it's not happening here at all. At all.
No, and I mean, it's also it is, again, I think we need to be clear that when we're talking about this, we're talking about, and that is not real life. And that, that is not where most people exist. And so, on Twitter, it is extremely partisan, and it definitely veers towards the left, I think, in a lot of what I've seen, at least, and especially on the AB Ledge feed. And there is a lot of vitriol towards whether it's Shandro or Kenny. Like, I think it was either earlier today or yesterday that Tyler tweet out a condolence for the people who had passed away. And all of the responses are just brutal to him. And all he's doing is, as the Minister of Health, tweeting that he is sorry that Albertans have lost their lives, and people can't even back on it. So I think that we need to think about how we address this, because the other thing is shit-talking the government on Twitter isn't going to get you what you want. I don't know why people think that that's going to be an effective solution to their problems.
Well, but the flip side of the coin, the doctors have found all the other professional avenues haven't worked. So they're now resorting to shit-talking the government on Twitter because they've tried to have those conversations in a collegial manner.
So they say.
Put it this way, the track record of doctors, I trust them more than the track record of the UCP telling me that they're having conversations.
Deirdre?
Let's see. I actually haven't been I'm still engaged on Twitter. I haven't been on the AB Ledge feed in I don't know how long.
That's why you probably seem so happy.
Maybe. So I haven't really been there as often, but I remember what it was like. And, and I do see some of these things that are frankly, kind of beyond partisan and not very helpful. I don't know. I'm kind of jealous of other provinces that are able to work and rely on one another party-wise. And I don't see that here. I don't even know what that would be like to have that. I think it would be good. I think it would be very good.
Well, and I think too, just to what happens too for partisans on the right is that they see a lot of this vitriol and reaction. And I'm not talking about just with Tyler Shander. I'm talking about in general since the UCP, actually since before the UCP won the election. Mm-hmm. And the more you see this stuff, the more you see people that you care about, people that you respect, people that you work with get attacked, the more your back gets up. And you see that on the left too. Mm-hmm. So we are in this position now where both camps are like, no, I don't want anything to do with you. I'm not going to have this conversation, because even entering into the fold can result in nonsense. So I think that we are unfortunately in a very difficult time. We're going back to last week when we talked about people being in a band together and living their best lives. Like that, I don't know how we get back there in this province. I really honestly don't.
Yeah.
And even a pandemic doesn't seem to be the thing that's doing it.
Well, as an example, when you, Kristin, put out the fiscal conservative tweet last week, there was...
That went well.
Well,
it was such a reasonable question.
It was a brilliant question. And there was...
Mark's question, just for anybody who's watching, it was like a variation on Mark's question.
Right, but it's, that question and that type of thing is what I think is there. I chimed in and just said to the person that got some insulting comments, I'm sorry you heard this, and two of the people in that blocked me. And I've never communicated with them. I have not had a single conversation with two of those people there, and they blocked me.
Oh, welcome to conservative Twitter. Like, I think I work for Indigenous Relations, and my minister posts all these like adorable things, and has recently. He posted this picture of him and Dr. Dina self-hugging, and it was just like a cute photo of my adorable minister and Dr. Dina very far apart, hugging each other, and someone commented like, "I hope you burn in hell, you piece of shit." Like, that's the kind of the visual. And I mean, it's not like it was much better 4 years ago, but that's where we're at. And so I think it's really going to take people from both sides to come together. And I think it will honestly take Kenny and Notley to do a joint press conference. That would be fantastic and a good start.
They have to publicly work together in order to try and heal some of this divide. Because it's not helping, right? It's not helping. The government, and the thing is, you can't even say that the government is completely unwilling to listen. I mean, publicly, they are completely unwilling to listen to the opposition. However, they have made changes, right? There was the calls for the rental protection.
Yeah.
They're right, and they did make that change. They just publicly will not acknowledge that they are listening, but then they'll change, they'll announce a policy change.
But there's also a lack of acknowledgement on the NDP part about certain things. So, for example,
when they have done well,
one of the things that bothers me the most is some of these responses to the Minister of Community and Social Services about the cots in the convention center. And during the Fort McMurray fires, that was exactly how evacuees from the Fort McMurray fire were housed. No, I mean, obviously it was different. And I understand that there is the meter issue.
Communicable disease.
But if that was good enough for them, I don't understand why now we're treating the UCP like they're evil incarnate for doing the same thing.
Yeah, I kind of do think, because the first thing that I thought of when I saw those pictures as well was those aren't far enough apart.
Yeah,
but I don't. Right. Again, like you said, yes, it's different. I mean, providing that everyone in there is healthy, it's not a problem. It's inside. It's out of the elements. It's better than what they may have. Again, there is that sticky part right now about social distancing. The mats are too close together. They're really close together. And I kept looking at it going, is it possible that these are 2 meters apart? And I'm just, and just the angle is not really right.
Or one Don Iveson apart, as is the Edmonton rule.
Yes. There's been some good ones. It just...
But there's been umpteen dozen examples of the hypocrisy on both sides.
Yeah.
The UCP did this when they were in opposition, and now they're doing it in government, and blah blah. Like whatever happened last week doesn't matter, and not just because we're in a pandemic and we're all inside and we don't remember what day it is. That's been normal. Like the outrage machine is always the outrage machine, no matter what. You just go and stand at the machine and you operate the machine, and it's like, but that pick kicked out the exact same response of why it was bad for you a year ago. Who cares? It sounds good. Let's go. It's annoying. It's annoying. I used to be a partisan, and it was annoying then, and it's still annoying.
So it is. It's very annoying, and I think we all just want it to stop for a minute so that we can just feel. Together, because we don't feel together right now.
Yeah.
But the other side of this, I do want to get back to the cots here, because I do have a question about it. But here's a prime example for me, and I'm going to be honest. I'm going to be upfront. There are a few people I really am. I don't hate a lot of people, and there's a lot of people I do dislike. Not really. I try to keep that at a bare minimum. But Mr. Antiferin, Professor Antiferin, is a person that has been a bother to me. And this will push some people on the left. But his tweet yesterday about Global Edmonton and saying that he was trying to have a conversation about oil sands and the dangers that are going on in the oil sands in Alberta, and that Global Edmonton didn't want to talk about that. That was just retweeted by a bunch of people without any verification or any, wait a minute, can we hear the other side of this before we retweet this information? Like, it just, to me, the frustration is someone is posting, people are posting things on Twitter and they're getting retweeted. And I'm not saying that we need to have a journalistic diploma before we go on Twitter, but at least think a little bit before we just start simply retweeting stuff.
You're asking too much, Kevin.
Apparently.
People put some thought into what they're saying before they hit the send button on Twitter.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm guilty of it.
At this point, I've got more hope for Jason Kenney and Rachel Notley having a joint press conference
than that. Me too. 6 feet. Dawn Iveson's apart, but
you know what? I'll even go one step further. I believe they'll hug before I believe that people on Twitter are going to think about before they.
That's not physical distancing, Mark.
Oh, it'll be the day we finally get
them the year and a half, too.
Yeah.
Oh God.
What will happen is we could have that hypothetical hug whenever we're hypothetically allowed to do it, and you're going to have somebody from both sides white out the other one and put in Satan, and it's like the following leader is in league with Satan. And like that's what Twitter is. And so I don't expect more from Twitter. I'm also like I'm sometimes disappointed that reporters go to Twitter for their news coverage. It's like, hey, what's going nuts on Twitter? Maybe I'll cover that for a story. Like I said, everyone's freaking out about Chandru calling a physician on a personal phone number, and that's gone nuts. But, oh, hey, wait, a town of 2,500 people in rural Alberta just pulled all their doctors out.
And that, you're right.
Where's that outrage? Like, sure, it's been shared a few times, but nowhere to the level of doctor got phone call from health minister.
Yeah. And that's the back to the cot thing, which I think is relating here. So where, because I'm asking this because I don't know the answer to this, and this was a question that was popping in my head, because Mayor Nenshi said that they couldn't put them in hotels because the provincial government said it was too expensive. So what happened there? Like what?
And she backtracked on that. He adjusted what he was saying. He said that they had put that forward proposal, and that because to say it was too expensive is not correct. That the provincial government had responded and said that to secure them against suicide prevention protocols, that was an extreme cost to those particular providers. Again, my main issue here is that we talk about this like this is some inhumane thing that we're doing to people. When we did this during the Slave Lake fires, we did this during the Calgary floods, we did this during the Fort McMurray fires. And yes, the social distancing issue that Deirdre brought up is a thing. However, this has been good enough for Albertans for 10 years worth of disasters. So to act like all of a sudden we are putting people in some inhumane condition that no one could take, we would never have done this. If Notley was premier, this would not even be an issue. People wouldn't be reacting this way.
So let me go from the opposite side of the coin. I agree with everything you're saying, that, if it was good enough for these other crises, it's good enough for this one. Maybe give a little more space. But we're also in a situation right now where we have hundreds of hotels around this province who are lacking any type of funds, who I'm pretty sure aren't going to be charging the province $250 a night. If they could get $25 or $30 in to help pay for these bills, then that puts them that much further ahead. So, it's a trade-off. You go to the hotels, you negotiate. I will fill your place, but you're charging me $25 a head a night. Well, okay, there's money going into the economy. So that could be, another way of putting money into Albertans' pockets without just cutting everybody a check.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, I have to agree with Mark at that one as well. Is that the big difference right now is that we have hotels that are empty. We actually have a place where people could stay, and that isn't something that we've had in the past. So there is that, and while I fully respect suicide prevention protocol, I don't believe that there's that many individuals that would be suicidal, and if we still need the gym, then we get the gym, but, put everybody else in, try a hotel. I don't know.
Yeah. I wanted to understand that a little bit more than what I saw, and I wasn't sure what's going on.
But I think the other issue that we're all, that is as difficult as pundits, as people talking on a podcast, is none of us are in the room in these conversations.
No, and I'm not even in the province, so I that's why I feel like I'm asking some questions that I personally need some clarity from what I'm seeing on Twitter, because I'm sorry, I'm not gonna just simply react because I see a caught. Like I'm gonna try to be a little bit more calm here and just, okay, what's really going on here?
Yeah, my first response is the same as Deirdre's, was that I think they're too close. Not that's inhumane.
Yeah. Which leads to Keystone, which I do think even Derek Filderbrand thought the Alberta NDP did a good job on asking some questions about. And Kenny announced that they were going earlier this week, during one of the days that we still call a day, it was earlier in the week, that Keystone would be something that they would be investing in. I guess we'll start. What are your thoughts on that? What did you think about that? Is this a good idea? Bad idea? What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, silence. So it's a little tricky, for sure. But I will say that I did get an email from Derek with that, and it always makes me laugh when he says something like, "This is actually quite reasonable." And that was the NDP release going, "We need more information." That was it's a tough one, because it really depends on who you've been listening to. So, I have this weird thing where I listen to both Conservatives as well as people left of the CP. And so, my first issue with it was I thought we were broke. That's been an excuse for so many things. We don't have money for this. We don't have money for that. We're broke. Yet, apparently, we've got $1 billion to invest. And the thing is that I look at the majority of government programs as also being investments. So if we have $1 billion to invest in an oil company, then we have $1 billion to invest in education too. Personal opinion. But that's not what people mean when they say they're broke. They don't mean I've got $1 billion to invest. They mean I don't have any money. That's usually what broke means. So that was, I think, the big issue with this announcement. Other issue, if you want to get down to the brass tacks of investing in Alberta companies, is will there be $1 billion for every oil and gas company, for every hotel, for every small business? Like, are we going to throw money at every business in Alberta, or is this a special one? Because that's where you really start having an issue, is essentially, to quote Jason Kenney, where the government picks winners and losers.
And, I do think that the perception around what happened when we were podcasting and the laying off of 25,000 education folk, I think that did rub some people the wrong way, maybe on Twitterati, maybe not, but I do think that impacted, I think, an observation about this, but I think it does. I think it does.
I mean, at the same time, I think that this was a campaign promise that the UCP made. This was something that they talked about quite consistently. They talked about getting Keystone built. They talked about pushing it through. I agree that the concerns and issues that the NDP brought up are relevant. Like, Notley is right when she talks about the fact that we lose control of the regulatory process the second it hits. We do. Mm-hmm. And so she is right to ask some of these questions. However, this should not come as a surprise to anybody that they've chosen to do this, because this was one of their fundamental promises even before the election. They talked about Keystone all the time. And I personally...
And investing in oil and gas.
Yes, and I have no issue that they've chosen to do this. I do feel that there should be transparency around what that's going to look like and how we are actually going to manage that going into the U.S. Because, like Mark pointed out, in months, we could be dealing with an entirely new administration. And if, God forbid, it's Bernie Sanders, it
won't be.
Yeah, I don't think you got to worry about that, Kristin.
But he's opposed to Keystone. Biden is 50-50. He's never spoken about it as far as I know. But we could be dealing with a completely different response. So there are questions that need to be answered in terms of what we are investing and how we're supporting this company. I think it's a great idea. I also think it's a little weird to do press conferences at 6 a.m. to announce a huge government decision when most Albertans are asleep, especially now.
Because we don't get to sleep until 2-3 o'clock in the morning.
Somebody made the point that he did that because it was before markets open. So maybe that's why.
Could be.
Still a weird time to announce something big. I was only awake because I don't sleep anymore.
Right. I was up at 2 a.m. like Thursday or Wednesday or Thursday.
What is sleep? What is this?
I went to sleep, right?
What is this Thursday you're talking about?
Yeah. I know. I wake up with like anxiety dreams at like 4 o'clock. Like yesterday I dreamt that I went with like Dave Breckenridge on some road trip with a tiger. Like my life is just... things are getting weird in my head.
No Joe Exotic though, is it?
Yeah. I watched that entire... It's so great. It's so good. It's so good.
I need to finish that one.
She killed him.
I understand. Mark, what do you think?
Spoiler alert.
I'm going to try to get us back on the rail here. Mark, what do you think?
No, it's. This is a government that's always made it clear that it supports the oil and gas industry. This wasn't surprising. Odd to have a 6 a.m. press conference. I'm sorry, as much as, it's before the markets open. The markets don't care what Jason Kenney has to say. Some guy in New York, if you press them and go, who's the premier of Alberta? The first question is going to be where? And then the second one, he'd probably give you the president of Albania. It's just, we're not that big of kids in the players and the whole thing. It's just bad timing. And this has been my biggest beef with the UCP government is that they seem to be going ahead with their agenda despite the pandemic, not adjusting anything because of a pandemic.
That's I think fair.
It is fair. Everybody else's plans went right out the window, except ours. Ours is just
yeah.
I like how I just came back for that.
Yeah, we were enjoying that too. You're like, we got a shoulder. You look like you're talking to your cat, and then all of a sudden, boom, back.
Just vaping in the corner. It's fine. If my mom is watching, please stop watching.
No, keep watching. No, yeah, the stubbornness part of this is a bit weird, but I think the next question about this is in terms of what some people were talking about where oil is not a valuable thing to invest in anymore. Alberta needs we've heard this conversation before, but I do think that now may be a good time to open the idea of diversifying the economy. A reasonable conversation to have? Unreasonable?
I think it's a bullshit conversation to have. Okay. Crap, as we identified earlier. And I say this only because I saw the headline that Rachel Notley went on about this is the time to diversify the economy. geez, if we'd only given her 4 years to outline what the hell that meant. Oh, wait, we did. It's maddening that it's always the go-to in this province that we can't count on the next oil boom. We got to do what we can to diversify the economy, and then we hit a bump, and then it's like, well, now we got to definitely diversify the economy. Okay, what does that mean? Nobody has an answer for it. The NDP are going to be the last ones who should stand up and accuse anybody about not diversifying the economy because they had 4 years to do it. They had 4 years to say, this is our grand vision for Alberta. They didn't do it.
Yes, so, Mark.
Yes, so.
Winning my heart right there. But it's true. Like, we talk about this a lot, and this is a consistent conversation, and whether or not it's diversifying the economy or introducing a sales tax, which we should. We talk about both of these things constantly, especially talk about them when things suck. But when things are good, just like, we're going to put more money into the heritage. How's that going? I don't know. Probably not well. We need to actually look at what that means for Alberta. And if that is about whether or not we put more money into green energy, like under the carbon plan that we had, there was some money put into green energy and green energy projects, and that was great. But what sucks about the carbon tax and what is difficult about the carbon tax and what was difficult about the carbon tax in Alberta is you could not sell it in a 5-minute elevator speech. It was impossible to tell somebody in 2 minutes or less, why is this a good idea? Why do we need this? Why are we doing this?
Well, I had an answer for that.
When I asked...
I had the 30-second pitch. Keep that money in Edmonton as opposed to Ottawa.
Pardon?
That's all you had to say. Ottawa's going to hit us with it anyway. Put the money into Edmonton instead of Ottawa. Done. It doesn't matter if you believe in climate change or not. Justin's going to tax us. So you got two choices. Send the money to Ottawa or put it in Edmonton. There were hardcore conservatives who didn't believe in climate change who agreed with me on that.
But the UCP response to that was, well, we're going to take them to court, so it doesn't really matter.
And let's see how well that's being.
Yeah.
Well, but they did win, right? So the point simply is that in Alberta...
Hang on. They didn't win. They got the Alberta Court of Appeals to agree, but this is now going to the federal, and we got two other provinces where the federal side won. So we haven't won anything yet.
That's true. Okay, we mini won. But the point, and I like the carbon tax. I had no issue with the carbon tax personally.
Well, it was a backdoor sales tax. They should have just called it that, but you couldn't because then you had to do a referendum in the province. So,
guys, one day I think we're going to get our sales tax. I think it's going to happen.
So when I was ED of the Alberta Party, we had a lot of these big, heady conversations. Like I sat down in a room with Stephen Mandel, Karen McPherson, Rick Fraser, Greg Clark, and a number of other people that, beyond MLAs actually were knowledgeable in various points. And we asked the question, what does a diversified economy look like? And so we sat and whiteboarded a bunch of this over time. And it's like, okay, we need to put more money into our film industry. And not just to bring Hollywood north, but Bollywood north, because there was identification that there was a ton of films that if you did them in Bollywood style in India, that would attract a ton of people through tourism to Alberta, and not just into Banff, but into Edmonton, into Drumheller, into that. Like there were so many other areas. So we were talking about how do you diversify tourism beyond Banff and the Beavers and the Mounties. There were tons of ideas. Like, some we got laughed at, like let's bring in automated vehicles up and down Highway 2. But there was also a point brought up that of all the automated vehicle testing going on, none was in a cold weather environment. So this was an opportunity for Alberta to step up and say, let's be the cold weather environment to test these things. Mm-hmm. Let's do medical testing, AI testing and the like in Edmonton. Let's take the U of A and expand what they've got. Like we were throwing everything at the shit, spaghetti, whatever you want, at the wall to see what would stick. Because when you actually ask the question of what does a diversified economy look like, you have to be able to open it up to everything. The NDP had 4 years to do it. They didn't have a single idea that they brought forward. They threw some extra money at tech, which then got dumped by the UCP. But we're not seeing anything from the last government or this government on how we truly diversify Alberta's economy. What do we look like in the 22nd century, not just the 21st?
Yeah, no, I can't disagree with that.
I'm going to get shirts that say that. Can't disagree with Mark.
It's, the thing in Alberta is, and the NDP did it as well, as much as everyone expected them not to turn around and then just rely on the oil and gas sector, the NDP did it too. The UCP is doing it. This is not, this is a part of our heritage. Is what this is.
Wow.
Wow. Commercial coming out.
Well done.
This is the, this is what Alberta knows. Everything else seems risky, and it was risky to the NDP. It's risky to the UCP. Obviously, it was risky to the PCs. Now, granted, they had a lot more better time with it, but this requires a lot different thinking, much more so than, and as soon as they hop into government, they realize how important and how reliant Albertans and the government are on oil and gas, right? And as much as we might be able to sit back outside of government, sorry, I think there's a dog fight going on somewhere nearby. Anyway, so as much as there may be, as much as we can sit outside of it and say, we could do all of these different things, we always have to be aware that that looks much different when you're actually sitting in government, right? Like, no one expected the NDP to turn around, to pull a
180.
Gas as they were. Like, no one expected that. People didn't accept it when it happened, but it happened. Whether the detractors want to admit it or not, the NDP became a pro-oil and gas party.
They stood up to their federal counterparts in Edmonton about oil.
Oh, well, that was just ridiculous. I can't even believe that their federal counterparts put them in that position. That was just stupid.
Right, it was dumb, but we forget that. Right? We forget that happened.
No one will ever forget that happened. No one in Alberta will forget that happened.
Oh, yeah, there's a ton of people that do, because they aren't going to give the NDP any credit.
Oh, well, okay, right. Oh.
So they've completely forgotten that. They don't remember it. It never happened.
They remember that it happened. They don't remember what Notley's response to it was.
That's right. Yes. Okay. Yes. And actually, to be fair, a lot of NDP supporters will, they seem to forget what happened, even though they remember Notley's response to it.
Well, and this is part of the problem with partisan politics, especially for the extreme sides of our spectrums, is that they equate winning with implementing this purity of message that, the NDP won government in Alberta. So therefore, the most purest and most disciplined, doctrined, democratic socialist government now has to occur, which has to, we passed the LEAP manifesto. This has to happen in Alberta. And collectively, the Alberta NDP went, fuck off. Like, we're not doing that here, because that would not only kill our electoral success, but it would also probably kill the province. We're not wanting to do that, because they understand the role and the responsibility of being the government over being the NDP government. And we're seeing the same thing even from ardent conservatives on the opposite side, is that, they're screaming and yelling, the ones that are the pro-lifers, the creationists, they're sitting there screaming, why are we doing these following things we've got government, and as much as people might not like me saying this, Jason Kenney isn't necessarily governing how he may actually believe. He's actually governing what a small C conservative government might do.
Did that hurt?
I'm still a hard believer he's a populist, and I really don't like populists. But at the end of the day, they're not going to implement everything that's in the policy book, because that's a guarantee on how to get unelected for the rest of the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But we have these partisans, because they're the ones who go out and door knock, and they're the ones that donate, and they're the ones who are the ardent supporters who expect those things to happen. Wow, we got one blackout, one roof. So that's the problem. That's the problem when we get, is that we get these partisans who are also probably the most vicious on social media about what their team's doing and what the other team's doing.
Right. If you watch Jeremy Nolis versus Matt Wolf.
Yeah. I don't like listening to either.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm not impressed with both of them, and whole other topic, I guess. But the last topic I want to address before we do something fun, which we will try to do at the end, and then she came out yesterday and announced all public events in Calgary will be closed until June 30th. He also stated if the Stampeders and Flames should want to or able to play, i.e. their leagues are saying let's go back, they're not able to play in Calgary. The reason I'm bringing this up is July 3rd is scheduled to be the opening of Calgary Stampede. I think we know that there's some trepidation of if that will start or not. But the other side, becomes a bit of a big difficult issue in that the Calgary Stampede is an economic boon for the city. And for those out there that are like, I don't like the Stampede, I don't like what they do, that it is a fact that the Calgary Stampede has been an economic boom for the city of Calgary and the province of Alberta. It is a tourist attraction. It makes money, and if it does not go, this will hurt Calgary and Alberta significantly. So, with all of this together, how would you suggest that the Calgary Stampede move forward?
So, I think that they're making the right decision in terms of being. Like, I think, what was the deadline that she gave? Like, the end of June?
Yes. And he said, if July 1st everything is better, I had a dream that July 1st we would be all better and we can go back. Nenshi being Nenshi.
He's doing the right thing. And at this point, like, I'm no fan of the Stampede. There are a lot of things about the Stampede that I hate with a deep, deep, deep abiding passion. However, you're right. It is extremely good for Alberta. It is good for the finances of the hotels, for the service industry. So it would be great to be able to see, oh God, that's hurt my heart, to see it go forward for that reason, because it could add to all those things. So I think we wait, right? Like at this point, everything is just waiting, because Edmonton is the same. I mean, K-Days is not as big of a boom as Stampede, but it's still a very important part of our lives. So is Fringe Festival. So is all the other festivals that we have in this city. So is Folk Fest. And we don't know if any of those things are going to happen right now. So you just kind of have to wait and see and hope. And I think we also have to put people first. And the reality is that if we're not out of this, as much as it sucks, we have to cancel it. But we also have to think about the long-term economic impacts that that's going to have on Calgary. Because God knows how much money they probably make in what Stampede's a week. Is it a week, Mark?
Yeah, it's 10 days.
Don't ask me. I'm from Saskatchewan.
You live in Calgary, so I just kind of assumed that was your jam.
Yeah, no, I think it's about 10 days. I think it starts on a Friday.
It's the first Friday. It's the first Friday in July, and it runs for 10 days.
Yeah.
Okay.
See, you knew.
I had to. I used to work in the oil patch, and it was the worst 10 days of my life. But
huge for political networking.
So let me.
I was sick last year. I was supposed to get a tour this year.
So let me jump on a few things here. Is that first of all, I think Nancy should have just said it's over right off the bat. I mean, I'm not seeing any of the modeling that they're sharing that's saying that we're going to be in a great spot come July anyway. On top of that, we have absolutely no data on whether or not we have a reinfection. So we don't know if we can reinfect people. So let's put 100,000 people into close quarters and see what happens. Like it's just
close quarters.
Yeah. It usually is a tourist attraction, except nobody is going to be traveling in the next 4 months. Like, who the hell is going to get on an airplane and go anywhere? Like, we've got bigger issues. Like, how do we keep WestJet alive? How do we keep Air Canada alive? Not how do we keep the Stampede alive? The other one is that people seem to forget that Stampede is a rodeo. Like, that's really what I know all the drunken National North and all the food stuff seems to be great, but it's really the apex of all the rodeo stuff that leads up to Stampede. So we don't have anybody doing their bull riding and their horse riding and anything else and barrel riding the cart. We don't have any of that going on. So who's competing at Stampede on July 3rd?
I don't follow the rodeo scene, so I don't know if any have been canceled or not.
Yeah, well, for lack of better terms, every sporting has been canceled. So how do you go and win the Innisfil Rodeo or the Sundridge Rodeo or any of those other things that would get you into the Stampede Rodeo or any of the southern ones? And are we going to allow Americans up to compete at that point anyway? So if we're not allowing the hockey teams and the football teams to compete, why would we be allowing American participants in the rodeo? And then, people are going to point to, the 2013 flood and how this was an opportunity for the city to gather and galvanize and, come hell or high water. Completely different circumstances.
Yeah, absolutely. That I agree with.
This isn't the Stampede grounds have been flooded and we're going to still go out and support and be Calgarians. This is like, I could walk into a room and end up infecting 10,000 new people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is completely different. This is a completely unknown situation that we're in. And I agree, Nancy should have just said, it's done. My grandmother, who was born and raised in Calgary, she's going to be 89 this year. She was saying, she's like, that's never happened in the history of the Stampede, that they have canceled it. And I said, yeah, well, it's different. This is just different. But, that was her first thought, is they've never canceled it. Like, they don't really have a choice. But, I mean, she still asks me every day if things are better yet. So that's what I'm dealing with.
So,
yeah, drink.
We know. Okay, so we know there's no rodeo. We know there'll be no barrel race. The sport activity, the competitions at the Calgary Stampede, we know are not happening. We're 99.99% certain. I don't think we're speaking out of turn here. Is there a way, though, to do some sort of virtual? Maybe I'm being ridiculous here. Is there an opportunity here to do some sort of virtual type festival where people could, although we cannot gather in person, gather in a way that
not for the Stampede?
But
like, I think
pay-per-view concert. I mean, we do pay-per-view
fights.
fights.
Do that. Absolutely, you could do that. Like, if you got the artists that were going to be at Stampede. But the other thing that I just want to quickly point out about the Stampede is rates of sexual assault spike during the Stampede. So the Stampede is a time where dudes get super rapey. So I'm actually not that sad that it can happen, because now we're avoiding that. So there are
benefits.
There are benefits.
Like, there are a lot of societal negative impacts from the Stampede, and I think we as a society haven't talked about that, and maybe we will for it, I don't know. But I think also have to talk about the fact that we can connect in a lot of different ways. We just don't need to do it through drunken teenagers getting God knows how intoxicated and hurting themselves, because that's a lot of what the Stampede is. Granted, I've never been, but my understanding is there's a lot of people drinking to the point that they can't function.
Oh,
to
yeah.
like the end of this podcast.
It's a part of Stampede. And as a guy who used to work downtown oil and gas, that was very much the, I mean, we would have, sales guys and the like who would leave the office at 7 a.m. because there was a Stampede breakfast they had to go to, and you got the vodka and orange roll in at that point, and it would roll through, and they would go until 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning and come in back at 7 the next morning, and that was going for 10 days.
Yeah.
And, one of the challenges we always had in oil and gas is that it wasn't everybody. It was the accounting department didn't get to go and get drunk like for 14 hours on the company dime, because that was frowned upon, because the sales guys could write it off as, I'm entertaining clients for 10 days.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's some societal challenges. I mean, not only do we have the rapey issue, as Kristin pointed out, we also have the Calgary health centers down here would talk about a peak in sexually transmitted diseases popping up shortly. You would generally have the highest amount of divorce claims would come in usually the week after Stampede.
We're going to have so many divorces after this.
That too, but 9 months after Stampede was generally the biggest birth rate in Calgary. So,
apparently scientists have disproven that.
Well,
not necessarily particularly with Stampede, but with blizzards.
DQ blizzards or weather blizzards?
That's what we're worried about in July in Calgary is the blizzard that comes through.
Hey, but it is always a risk because it's Alberta.
Yeah, it's true. It's true.
But I mean, there's definitely some downsides. There's people that speak highly of Stampede. I always made a point of trying to book one of my weeks off during the Stampede week, because while everybody was coming to work in their cowboy outfits, I always asked why I couldn't wear my Batman one. And they're like, it's not Halloween. And they're like, when you become a cowboy, I'll believe.
May as well be Halloween.
Yeah.
Fair.
Yes, I have a pair of cowboy boots. I bought them in 2012.
Shit kickers. They're correctly called shit kickers. You don't own cowboy boots.
Okay, but actually, and they're the pretty ones, so they're not even real cowboy boots. They're like dress-up cowboy boots, but they have like 4 scuff marks on them because I've only worn them 7 times. 2012.
So maybe this leads, I guess this is one of those conversations that leads, where do we go with the Calgary Stampede going forward? Because, it is going to suck not to have the like, economically for Calgary, it is, like, I agree.
Everything sucks, though. That's the thing, is that I think that, again, to make it about the Stampede is to forget that Calgary was hurting before this. Calgary has been suffering and in an economic downturn before this. Now this has happened. You know what? One more thing is not going to negatively impact Calgary that much more than they're already suffering. I think what we need to focus on, as opposed to some little like festival where everybody gets drunk for 10 days, is about how we support service industry staff, hotel staff, and people who are struggling, who do not know when they're going to get back to work.
Yeah, that's...
We too often focus on one event because Stampede is the heart and soul of Calgary, and that's just not accurate.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, but I do think they're, like... I do think still, though, the economic boom that it could have for the city is just an add-on to what is happening already in Calgary. That's my one caveat to what you're saying. And I'm not saying that this necessarily we should be rushing to the Stampede, but there is an opportunity here in a positive way to have a real honest discussion of the influences and the things that you and Mark and everyone is mentioning about the negative events of the Calgary Stampede and what real value those attitudes have had in society. And maybe it's time to bring up the conversation and to see what we can do if we want to continue with the Calgary Stampede, how we bring that together in a more responsible way.
Well, it's the whole question, and I started asking this last week. What do political parties look like after the pandemic? What does the Stampede look like after the pandemic?
Yeah.
What does our economy look like? Are we talking about a crisis basic income, or are we talking a universal basic income? So how does the service industry change? How do hotels change? How does the work, like Deirdre and I were talking about it previously, one of the biggest things that's going to impact downtown Calgary, and it's got a 25-30% vacancy rate right now. Before a pandemic, it's now at about 100 because everybody's working from home. When oil companies start figuring out that they can run off of a server and 3 boardrooms and a premium Zoom account, why would they come back downtown? When you can run a company on 5 laptops, why would you come back downtown? And now, what's that do to Calgary? We at least had people who were driving in, paying too much for parking and too much for square footage in downtown Calgary. We're going to go from 100 to 0 in less than 10 years.
Yeah.
That's a bigger impact than what's going to happen to Stampede. Stampede will still happen. There'll still be rodeo. Like, I expect the NBA to come back, expect the NHL to come back at some point. Rodeo will come back. That part of Stampede will still occur. It's what happens to Nashville North, what happens to all the vendors, what happens. We're probably not going to have an event where 100,000 people come in the door and 95% didn't know there was a rodeo.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fair. Yeah. All right. Well,
for the live concerts, I watch the Dropkick Murphys on St. Paddy's Day online. So, that becomes a new delivery of entertainment to the masses.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I know.
And I think that we're also forgetting the way that I think this will impact the way that we all function. Like, yes, we all hate being home and isolated and not able to go out, but I think certain things will become more digitized in the way that we live our lives, because we will learn that we can, right? And we will save money that way. And concerts becoming digitized, cool. I think that would be great. I think that we will find a lot of different ways to function. And for things like the Stampede, they will have to adjust. But the problem being, of course, is that Calgary takes a lot of their self-worth from something like the Stampede. So it will be a hit to the community spirit to have something like that gone.
Well, we've got a football team named after it.
Yeah.
And
they're doing really well.
On the other side of that, Kristin, people won't know what day it is, so maybe they won't notice that they've missed it.
Yeah, maybe.
There's that.
There is that. So, does it? We usually like to try to end these with some sort of fun question. Does anyone have one that they want to ask? Where did Kristin go?
I don't know.
I just put my recycling in its area. I'm sorry. Yes.
Okay, what was that? So something fun, something nice, something positive.
I have an idea. So if you could go for lunch with one politician, who would it be?
Oh.
Living or dead?
Ooh, well, that makes it easier. The living list was pretty short for me.
Okay, Mark, who is it?
I would love to sit 6 feet apart from Winston Churchill.
Good choice.
Because, one, I would really actually like to see how he would respond to everything that's going on here. Here's the guy who, railed against the Nazis. It'd be interesting to see how he would rail against COVID-19. But he also liked his whiskey and cigars, which I'm also big fans of. So,
fair.
All right. I'm not ready. I'm still thinking. What?
No, I have, because I'm not ready and I'm thinking.
Oh, come on, people. There's so many politicians to choose from. We already know who. I'm not even going to ask Kristin first. I wanted to know the number 2.
Okay, you cannot say Joe Clark, Kristin. That's the first thing.
No, number 2.
That's not allowed.
Totally. Winston Churchill is number 2, 100%. I love Meet the Winston Churchill. I'm going to go watch like some Winston Churchill movies, I think.
Darkest Hour is on Netflix right now. It was really good. Gary Oldman, fantastic in it.
I love Gary Oldman. Did he win an Oscar for that?
I think so. I don't know. It was
yes,
ages
he did.
ago.
In the before times.
Yeah. I almost said Gary Oldman. I'm gonna go Barack Obama.
Ah,
good choice.
That is a good choice. He seems like the type of person that you could sit down and enjoy a conversation with.
And he drinks beer.
And he does drink beer.
Any other reason?
No, just those. He's a nice guy and he drinks beer.
Nice guy, yeah.
Seems great, yeah.
Deirdre?
Okay. So actually the first person that came to mind, and I don't have anything wrong with this, just I would there's nothing wrong with the first person that came to mind, but I was trying to think of somebody else that I may, regret not mentioning, and I never came up with someone. So so the person that I would like to sit down with, because he was really forward thinking for his time, is
Mr. Who? Sorry?
Mr. What?
Abraham Lincoln.
Oh.
Yeah, I would like to sit down and have, I think that would be an interesting conversation because he was, like I said, he was very forward thinking for his time. And I must say that watching, current depictions of history have made me stop thinking about history as being that much different than what we have now. Especially in terms of, the way that people acted and reacted and things. And I realize that they are current depictions, right? They're obviously not 100% based on reality, but you always think of history as being a completely different time. People acted differently. People thought differently. But what if they kind of didn't? Right? Which makes the idea of sitting down with Abraham Lincoln and having this, just normal. I would consider it normal. Obviously, for him, it was really forward thinking. But to have a normal conversation, I think, I really put a lot of thought into this question, and that's where I am with it. Deep.
Yeah.
Very deep, yes.
Daniel Day-Lewis, by the way, did a great job. Lincoln.
Yes, he did.
Yes, did a fantastic job. Great actor. All right, well.
So one other positive I'd like to throw out there, and I might have mentioned it slightly last week, but I'm definitely going to push it this week, is I want to give a big thumbs up to a ton of the small brewers.
Yes.
They've taken advantage of the opportunities that the AGLC in Alberta here gave them, is that they could start delivering beer now. And so I'm currently enjoying the Reaper's Choice from New Level Brewing. I was actually really impressed. A lot of the breweries are doing a lot of things to keep their people as well as their customers safe. New Level seem to have kind of found a whole new level to go to, being the New Level. They contacted one of the laboratories on how can we be safe. They are spraying everything down with isopropyl, and then they deliver it to the house. And it's fantastic. You can do everything online. And I know they're not the only ones doing online delivery, but it's just really awesome to see small businesses pivoting in this time to try and keep their doors open. And so big thumbs up to them. If you're not in Calgary, I'd be more than happy to connect you with your local brewery, because I know a ton of them are doing those kind of deliveries, because this is important. This is supporting local, and yeah.
And I think it's good to give a shout out to a whole bunch of people that are doing a lot of innovative and interesting things. And there were so many that were mentioned in Vancouver yesterday at the press conference, and in Alberta yesterday. There are a lot of people doing a lot of really kind and generous things out there. And as much as it's so easy to point out the the fuck ups that people are doing, that they can't do social distancing right or physical distancing right, or you know, they're this and that. There's so much good stuff going on right now that it is important for us to focus on that too. Like, so easy to call someone an asshole, but there's good things.
It really is.
Yeah.
It is.
All right.
And fun.
Yeah. We are going to leave it there. For those who are not following those on Twitter, how do we follow you?
At Mitchell_AB.
Kristin?
At Kristin Raworth.
Yeah.
Which is spelled with a W, which nobody would guess that.
R-A-W or a T?
Kristin_Raworth.
Yes. And of course, you'll get your daily inspirational quote there as well in political t-shirts apparently this week. Mark?
AB Mark Taylor.
Oh, did
if
you
he's not piping up.
Okay.
Well, I was waiting my turn, so ladies first.
Okay. AB Mark. And
AB Mark Taylor, basic English, no E's, no C's.
Okay. And
no W's.
No W's either.
No W's. And I am at KEVOLE. Thanks, everyone, for sticking around, and we will talk to you all next week. Bye for now.
Bye.